This video was sponsored by War Thunder, more on them later in the video. Since the start of this channel, we have looked at a lot of games, with some of them being bad and others being good. But a type of game we rarely talk about is the lukewarm experience, a game that sits within the Schrodinger's cat box of being bad and good all at once. So today we end our hot streak of only looking at the extremes and venture into the world of one of these lukewarms. Today we are looking at Condemned 2 Bloodshot. Hello everybody and welcome to my retrospective on Condemned 2 Bloodshot, as well as my last retrospective on a Monolith Productions title for the foreseeable future. And what a game to end things off on. I mean, Condemned 2 is just such a melting pot. It's such a specimen. It displays every single bad and good habit that Monolith Productions kind of rolled into their games in the early 2000s. The story is extremely intriguing, but the cutscenes are goofy. The levels are great, but some don't play great. There are some new gameplay additions that make the game better, and there are some that make the game infinitely worse. It is an absolute curious critter of a game, and I'll say it right now, not a very good continuation of Condemned from a story perspective. By the way, if this was the first game you ever played on PlayStation, or is your favorite game ever, just skip this video, because it's only going to make you mad. But the bottom line is that this game is just a very different beast from the original, which is kind of surprising when you take into consideration that this game started productions literally 3 months after Criminal Origins came out. Like, by the end of the video, you're going to be wondering what happened between 2005 and 2009 that churned out this thing. Well, actually, you don't have to wonder, because I'm just going to tell you. Pretty much development for the game, like a lot of other elements, was handled really strangely. Starting out, there were some pretty clear focus points for the team. They wanted the story to have a darker tone while also making Ethan the clear center of said story this time around. The devs also wanted a deeper combat system, but apart from those elements, there wasn't a whole lot that everyone on the team was all in on. For example, the writing process was troubled. Frank Rook, who wrote on the first game and has been a design director on every video game ever made since then, had the monumental task of not only writing the sequel to the world's most vague game, but also answering many of the questions posed by said game. The real problem here was, how do you make a campaign all about revealing the secrets of the previous game without losing what made the previous game scary? Well, I'll tell you the answer that Frank came up with later in the video, but for now, the rest of development was also having some problems. Over in level design, the strange decision was made to prioritize environment variety over story needs, so much so that environments Ethan would travel through in the game were decided first, and then the story was written to accommodate them. Another huge change made to the overall tone of Condemned was the recasting of Ethan Thomas. According to Frank Rook, some felt that Ethan's character didn't really gel with the environments and story of the first game and wanted to move towards a darker tone for the character. The first step to making this happen was by replacing Greg Grunberg, who voice acted Ethan in the first game, with Andre, I don't know how to say that.
If the torturer is still at large, what's his MO?
That's me, Ethan Thomas.
Now, these changes by themselves might not sound massive, but together they began changing the course of the series. And whether they knew it or not, the developers were slowly creating less a continuation of the original and more a sharp redirection. But there's only one way to analyze that drastic redirection, and that's from within. But before we jump back into the dark and grimy world of Condemned, I want to thank YouTuber Dead Domain for their documentary on the development of Condemned 2. Just like with Fear 3, Dead Domain has been instrumental in uncovering exactly what happened during the development of Bloodshot, to the point that their video is nearly exclusively sourced in the development tab on the Condemned 2 wiki page. So yeah, if you want to know more about the development of Condemned 2, head over to Dead Domain's video and show your support. But otherwise, let's get Condemned 2 Bloodshot. Unless you're in Europe or Australia when this released, then it was just Condemned 2 B4 Brandos from the future. Just edit the video, let's get on with it. So the game begins with a cutscene in a dilapidated building. All seems quiet until Malcolm Van Horn sprints into view. He's obviously terrified, and hiding in an abandoned apartment, he begins recording a voicemail. Outside, a gunshot goes off, and looking out the peephole, Malcolm turns into the main game cover. By the way, that's not actually the intro cutscene. That's just a cutscene that plays when you boot up the game. So if you're one of those people that like like button mashes when you get into a game just to get to the main screen. Bozo, you just missed the inciting incident of the story. The game actually starts in Metro City's Serial Crimes Unit HQ. It turns out Malcolm was calling Rosa to try get in touch with Ethan, but since Rosa never knew about Malcolm in the first game because Ethan doesn't know how to convey information, the FBI is stumped on who was calling and decide to track down Ethan to see if he can give them some information. And where is Ethan? It's been 11 months since we've last seen Ethan and since the events of the last game, and things have gone really downhill for our protagonist, with him becoming a hardcore alcoholic as well as it seeming like he isn't fully in his right mind. A man then pushes past Ethan, sending him into a blind rage that gets him kicked out of the bar, and heading into the back alleys of Metro once again, Ethan gives us a little look into his current mind state.
That's me, Ethan Thomas. Drunk, tired, and pissed off. Why? Because this damn city's too fucking blind to see what's killing them. But I can. I've seen the unspeakable. It's out there. And I have a feeling we're about to get better acquainted.
Now after this we jump into gameplay, but before we go and continue on with the story, I do really want to talk about this opening cutscene. I mean, just from watching this thing, you simultaneously know that this game is going to be something. Whether it's good or bad is kind of up to your interpretation and personal taste, but whatever it is, it's going that way and it's going hard. I mean, just look at the new visual style. The serial killer documentary vibe of the first game has been thrown out of the window in favor of a new grindhouse type style. But I'm kind of talking about grindhouse in terms of what it means to me as a genre, and what it is grimy, kind of trashy, and takes itself way too seriously. And you can see all of that in this opening cutscene. Like, everyone in this game sounds like they're about to pop a blood vessel from how intensely they're talking about things.
He resigned from the agency shortly after and basically disappeared.
There's a ton of moments where they cut out the soundtrack to put emphasis on stuff characters say, even if it's not like a big deal at all.
He was cleared of those charges.
Right. Get out!
Also, for the trashy side of things, this is Rosa, by the way. You remember our lab technician from the first game? Yeah, she's hot now, and for no reason. The devs really just said, we have this character from the first game. Let's completely redesign her character model to the point where she's unrecognizable. If they really wanted to redo the model, then why not just make her look like her original concept art? With this game, I spent a good couple minutes wondering if this was even meant to be Rosa, and once it was confirmed, I spent another couple minutes wondering why, and slowly going, oh, I get it, because if there's one staple of Condemned, it's hot chicks, am I right? But yeah, honestly, she's just been redesigned to fit the game's vibe as a whole, which is that grimy, trashy, extreme feel. I mean, even Ethan isn't safe from the redesign team. Like, in this game, he is now an absolute unit, which is lore accurate, but he's also a white dude now. Like, what the fuck? Is this game real? Why is it styled like this? Why does Director Farrell look like he's trying to peek over the frame borders in this shot? Yeah, like I said, this opening cutscene is just like a wonderful little taste of things to come, man. Anyway, jumping back into gameplay, we pick up with Ethan in an alleyway where we meet a homeless guy who pretty much just shows up to tell Ethan he smells like shit.
You smell worse than I do. I sleep in garbage.
Hey, screw you!
Whoa, we got ourselves a mean drunk.
But feeling bad about being so antagonistic, the homeless guy says he's got a stash he'll share with us to make peace. So heading over, we find that the guy Ethan beat up in the bar has got to it first. But this isn't any ordinary guy. His eyes are completely white, he looks sickly pale, and he also says some strange things.
I should have killed you a long time ago.
He then sends some guys after us and we get a little combat tutorial, but beating the enemies, the guy from the bar sneaks up on us, hitting Ethan with a brick. And something's not right. Getting up, the world around us has changed. The sky above is a sickly green. Electricity arcs on the power lines above. Something falls from the sky that looks more like ash than snow. As we begin exploring, we find a shop front with a TV in it. Here a new mechanic is introduced, which is tuning TVs. Throughout the game you can find TVs, and aligning the antenna properly will give you some lore about the world. Now during most of the campaign you just get news broadcasts, but specifically in this level you can actually find the sponsor of today's video on this TV, which is War Thunder. War Thunder is a free-to-play vehicle combat based multiplayer game with over 70 million players worldwide for PC and consoles. In it you can fight with over 2,500 unique vehicles, which range from modern day tanks to the warships of the 1940s, all of which are highly detailed from how they play down to how they sound. Authenticity is key in this game, and you won't be let down when it comes to attention to detail with features like vehicle damage. In War Thunder, it's not just about hitting your target, it's about where you hit your target. Each vehicle has a number of essential parts it needs to function, so if you shoot out someone's fuel tanks, weapons, engine, or crew, you can expect a realistic outcome. It brings an entirely new aspect to the gameplay, allowing you, the player, to figure out how to keep bringing the fight even in the face of failing components. And what makes this so impressive is that the vehicle that is being damaged isn't some restrictive one-look 3D model created to perfectly simulate damage. These vehicles can be made utterly your own thanks to the game's insanely in-depth vehicle customization. This isn't just your average find a skin you like affair, this is customization that ranges from vehicle camos down to markings and extra props, making it a breeze to express yourself and add your own personal touches to your vehicles. And finally, a feature I personally recommend the game for is its unique gameplay. War Thunder isn't just a game about tanks or a game about ships, it's a game about all of them, and it accommodates players who enjoy all kinds of gameplay types. If you like fast-paced action, tanks is the way to go. If you like planning ahead, maritime warfare is for you, and if you like a mix of both, aviation might just be your thing. And the best part is that now is a fantastic time to jump in if you're new to the game or haven't played in at least 6 months, since you can use my sign up link that I've left in the comments or description to receive a massive bonus pack, which includes stuff like the exclusive Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, 100,000 silver lions, 7 days of premium account, and much more. But remember, this offer is available for a limited time only, so grab it while you can. Okay, but in all seriousness, through the TVs, in this level we actually meet a pretty interesting character, with it being the Alcohol Demon. And no, I'm not joking, that is his actual name. But Alco pretty much tries to convince Ethan that he needs to find Malcolm Van Horn and put an end to the mess that started in the first game. Suddenly, Malcolm shows up behind Ethan and vomits some black goo on the camera before running away. And with our objective set to follow him, we once again set off into the dark streets of Metro City. Now this level is called Rock Bottom, and for a first time player that name will seem like an understatement, because Metro City in this level is a shithole.
Breaking news. Water. Wet.
Okay, it's a mega shithole. I mean, the sky here is sickly green and black ooze seeps in from all crevices. The hardest hitting moment in this area for me is when a police helicopter zooms overhead, warning citizens to stay indoors.
I repeat, return to your homes and lock the doors.
What kind of place is this?
So continuing on through the streets, we chase Van Horn a bit, enter a hospital, get attacked by black goo monsters, I'm not joking again, and reaching Malcolm, we're once again ambushed by the barman, who then knocks us into consciousness again.
What the?
The whole thing was a dream, and we're saved from being bludgeoned when Rosa and a new character called Agent Dorland shows up. Ethan tells them that the voice on the recording is Malcolm Van Horn, and in response, he's ordered to report to SCU HQ in order to help with the investigation. And I know I've just sped through this whole opening level, but I kind of just want to talk about this opening from the outside looking in view. In the opening of Condemned Criminal Origins, it was serial killers, grimy city, and that was that. You got a taste of the game, and it gave nothing away, and here it's exactly the same, just in kind of a good and a bad way. Pretty much when I first played this game, I thought that the whole "it was all a dream" thing was really dumb. I thought we were getting an updated look at what Metro City was going through, but after thinking about it a little bit more, I actually think that the game is doing something smart here. I believe that this sequence is actually an extended version of Ethan's future-seeing powers from the first game. Ethan is getting a vision of what Metro City will become if he doesn't do something, and it's kind of obvious that that thing is tracking tracking down Van Horn and getting to the bottom of the mystery he got caught up in a year earlier. On a second playthrough, it's super interesting looking at this place and just seeing it as one of Ethan's visions. Also, I think the fact that Ethan got hit in the head with a brick might also be the reason that he doesn't get psychic visions through the game. But then again, I might also be doing the writer's job for them and creating a reason for something that they didn't even think about. And honestly, that might just be the case, because while the writing in the first game was iffy at some points, it only ever straddled the line of eye rolling. But in this game, I don't know, man, it feels like the writer just took a ton of story threads from the first game and went, stupid, boring, lame, and then he wrote the whole game and then was told by upper management that he had to answer some of those plot threads that he just threw out. I mean, I know it sounds like I'm exaggerating here, but I'm not. Frank Rook himself said he could probably have handled some of the continued story elements better, and there's no greater example of this than the massive mystery that was set up in the first game, which is, what's wrong with Metro City? So for some catch up, in the first game, a massive background mystery was, what exactly is wrong with Metro City? See, through the game, you're just trying to catch a serial killer, but your investigation takes you through the underbelly of Metro City, and through your travels, you observe humans that have hit rock bottom in all different forms, or so it seems. To me, and most likely many other first-time players, it would be easy to assume that there was just a drug crisis going on in the city, but as we moved forwards through the campaign, it became more and more clear in levels like Appleseed Orchard or the mall that whatever was going on is much bigger and much more connected to the SKX case than we thought. And in the main story for that game, we never really got any real conclusive answers for what was wrong with the city in question. But here in the second game, where our questions are meant to be answered, we do get a reveal to that original question in the first 10 minutes, and the answer sucks. Pretty much all you need to do to understand the story of the first game is go play the first couple minutes of Condemned 2. Go to this TV and listen what Alco has to say.
The city is full of these sonic devices. They're fucking with people's brains and they don't even know it. Where they come from is something you need to learn. But in the meantime, do yourself and the city a favor. Destroy them.
Yep, Metro is going crazy because of sonic emitters scattered all over the city. Was that satisfying? Are you happy with that answer? Okay, I don't know what to say here other than what the fuck? You just blurt out the answer to the biggest mystery of the first game in the first 10 minutes, and it's all in service of a fucking tutorial. Like, birds were a collectible in the last game, and now sonic emitters are one too, but you were just so eager to have these things as a collectible that you just threw away one of the biggest mysteries in the series for this. Like, really? I mean, it's just baffling that they did this, but they also made this 15-second tutorial the main driving objective of the game. Like, Alco just says, we don't know where these things come from. You need to find out, Ethan. Like, lazy story writing aside, can we just take a second to think about who's saying this? It's Alco, aka a little piece of Ethan's subconscious. How the fuck does Alco know that these sonic emitters are the things driving people crazy? Because if Alco knows something, then by extension, Ethan knows it too. This is even seen in the same level when Alco urges Ethan to go find Van Horn. It's obvious that Alco is just an extension of Ethan's psyche, telling him things he already knows. So that really begs the question, how does Ethan know about these emitters? Like, isn't one of the reasons he became a barfly because he knows the cult is behind everything and yet has no way to prove it? If he knew about the emitters and the fact that these things are pretty much on every corner in the city, he could easily alert some authorities that he does trust, or in a more in-character route, at least investigate them. Like, not only is it kind of insulting to have a tutorial reveal one of the original's biggest mysteries, but it's downright lazy writing. Remember in the first game how dead birds were a collectible? Remember how the mystery expanded as we learned that those dead birds only seem to show up in high crime rate areas? Remember how all of this added to the mystery and the ambience? Well, the writer didn't.
Birds are attracted to these sonic devices, but unfortunately their little brains can't handle the powerful wavelengths. The brain swells, the skull fractures, and then pop. They're dead. A lot of dead birds means a device is nearby.
Yep, dead birds are also the work of these sonic emitters, and Alco also just happens to know that, as well as how exactly they die, which kind of seems like information that could have been useful about a year ago when the FBI was heavily investigating the link between these crime wave areas and bird deaths. But hey, what am I saying? We all know that the writer was not thinking about these things when he was writing the story. Like during my playthrough, I half expected a JPEG of Frank Rook to appear on the screen alongside a paragraph of text explaining how Ethan destroyed the cult and lived happily ever after and the game was over now. I mean, just try to put yourself in my shoes. I love Condemned. I loved the lore of the original, and booting up Condemned 2, I wanted those answers. But as soon as I'm in, I'm just met with the most blatant 2 cases of I don't give a shit writing ever. And then after this 10-minute sequence of the game pretty much telling you that all of the answers that you want are going to be really shit, we get this wonderful little cutscene full of characters who sound like they were written to sound like Americans by someone whose only exposure to Americans is from watching the first 5 minutes of Demolition Man.
Sir, we have a positive ID. Yes, Malcolm Van Horn.
Acting.
Essentially, if there's a few things to take away from this intro, it's that Condemned 2 isn't really much of a sequel to Condemned 1. Sure, the story carries over, the characters carry over, the gameplay carries over, but the game doesn't want to be a sequel. It wants to be its own thing, and Condemned 1 is sort of an optional prequel. Anyway, I need to stop complaining, otherwise this video is going to go on forever, so heading into the next level, we rendezvous back with Ethan at the Preston Hotel. SCU has tracked Van Horn's phone call here, and our mission is to head in and find him.
Listen, you agreed to help us, but if you want to crawl back under your cardboard box, that's fine by me. Back off.
Okay, anyway, Hotel Preston is an all-round okay level. Throughout it, we spend a majority of the time just exploring rooms and whatnot, but I think a lot of the original Condemned vibe returns here, but in a sort of altered way. The Preston Hotel is different to many of the locations we visited in Condemned 1 just due to the fact that this place was once a very high-class establishment. It adds a new kind of level to Metro City sickness by showing that not even the rich are safe from the darkness. It's this mixed with some TVs we can find playing news reports that adds almost a surreal vibe to the game.
The streets scream out to us they are in pain, but no one knows why. I'm going to live, eat, breathe the streets for the next few weeks to see if we, the public, can find out what evidently the local can't or won't tell us.
And I gotta say, I dig it. I like this vibe. It doesn't hold a candle to the ambience of the original, but it still has its own kind of charm, I guess. They've just cranked up that madness on Metro City's darkness to the point where I think I find a whole new kind of appreciation for it. But yeah, I'm really only yammering about the atmosphere in this level because that's almost the only thing to talk about. Like, the game says that your objective is to search the building for Van Horn, and guess what you're doing for most of the level? Yep, you were going room to room looking for this guy. But there are some standout moments, like when we find a dead police officer in the lobby and are introduced to the new and vastly improved investigation mechanics. Back in the first game, if you were near a clue, Ethan would get a hunch and pressing T would make him pull out the correct investigation device. You'd pull the trigger and Rosa would do the rest for you. It wasn't the greatest system and honestly made Ethan seem pretty dumb.
Applewell. Apples.
But in Condemned 2, the whole system has been revamped to make Rosa still a present character, but not the driving force behind the investigation. Now she just asks the player prompting questions, like in this case,
Can you determine the cause of death?
Now here the game really does not cheap out. When Rosa asks a question like that, the way you get your answers is by looking at the body, picking out identifying features like a wound, and giving your interpretation of what happened. And this isn't some softball stuff either where the game says, do you think the police officer was pushed 20 stories or did he jump? No, in this game, they're asking you to look at blood spatters and figure out what the dispersal pattern is. We're looking at a gunshot wound and determining that the hole we're looking at was an exit point based on the fact that the fabric of the cop's uniform is pushed out. It is so cool. Like, remember when Batman Arkham Origins came out and everyone was talking about how cool the investigation systems were? Well, that game doesn't even compare to this one because you're not just looking for stuff. You need to figure out what the best investigation device is for the job, whether it be a camera, a blacklight, or a spectrometer. They all do different things and can give you an entirely new outlook on the crime scene. The funniest part is how much more advanced this system feels when really it's just like a glorified multiple choice quiz. You pretty much just answer Rose's questions, submit them, and if you've observed everything correctly, you'll get a perfect score and you'll get to continue. But this score doesn't really matter that much. I mean, anything over halfway is pretty much a pass, you know, since Rosa is kind of used to solving these cases herself. But if you really do mess up in one of these scenes, Rosa will say in like the nicest way possible that maybe you should have another look at the scene.
It's coming in now. Unfortunately, that doesn't help. You better get a sample and send me the data.
Now, there is only one bad thing about this system, and that's mostly that it's in the wrong game. Condemned 2 is not at all interested in being some investigation detective game. It really just wants to be its own thing, but it has to bring along some of the more unique gameplay elements from the last one just to maintain that kind of connective tissue between the two. But yeah, that's kind of what sucks about it. The investigation mechanics in this game are just really good, and yet they don't actually really fit the tone of the game. But anyway, back in the hotel, we learn a couple of things from the scene, with the first one being that our police officer has been here for about 2 days at this point. In the intro cutscene with Van Horn, we heard a gunshot, so it sounds like whoever was chasing him also attacked the cop. However, his attention wasn't on the officer, and he left him at the scene of the confrontation to go after Van Horn. The most important thing we learn here is that the police officer crawled his way to the lobby before bleeding out, meaning that if we find where he came from, we can find where he was shot, and if we can find where he was shot, we can find Van Horn. So setting out, the level pretty much just turns into the mall from the first game, where we have to run around following a blood trail while being attacked by enemies. So nothing crazy happens between here and the end of the level, although we do hear that a riot in the streets is growing more and more violent, as well as also traveling our way. But reaching the site of the shooting, we enter the hotel room, and inside it we find Malcolm Van Horn! Or what's left of him. Yeah, Malcolm's body is absolutely messed up. I cannot even show it on YouTube. I'm not joking. There is 50% of Van Horn left in total. It's crazy. But with our mission being complete, we're ordered to bring the body back to HQ. And with the level ending, we get a cutscene where Rosa suddenly hears a mysterious radio transmission from Agent Dorland.
Have the lab ready. Nobody is to examine the body until it has been removed. Is that understood? Good. I'll see to our other problem personally. Dorland out.
As well as that, she makes a discovery about Van Horn's body that is so shocking it turns her into a robot.
Wait a minute. This is not possible.
Wait, this is not possible. Now, back when we covered Fear 3, I commented on how unbelievably jarring some of the level transitions were, especially between the levels of the bridge and the airport. Like in that cutscene, Pointman fell into the ocean, and then we pick up with him sprinting away from some Alma dogs. It was bad, but here in Condemned 2, I think we actually have some competition, because the last we're with Ethan, he's on a pretty high level of the hotel. And can you guess where we see him next? No? Let's find out.
No.
God damn it, where's the fucking transport?
Okay, I'm done brushing off Monolith IP cutscene transitions. What is actually going on here? Because if you didn't put it together, the dudes chasing Ethan are the rioters mentioned in the hotel level. But why start the gameplay here? Did you not have time to make a gameplay section of escaping the hotel? Was this on purpose?
And this is where I put
the story beat that goes between the Preston Hotel and train tracks levels.
if I had one.
But moving on to the rest of the cutscene, Dorland turns around to shoot some of the guys chasing Ethan, and then decides to shoot a power box instead, which explodes, trapping Ethan on the other side of a small wall of fire that you're telling me a drunk man can't just run through? But either way, the devs just needed a way to actually get the level started, and for all things considered, the commuter tracks is a pretty solid level that puts the player's punching skills to work, which actually gives me the perfect opportunity to talk about the new and improved combat. So Condemned 2 was faced with a massive challenge during development. Being a sequel, you're expected to improve upon your old systems and evolve gameplay concepts. But back when development on this thing was first getting started, Criminal Origins was considered to be the best first-person brawler out there, and if you want to know why, go watch the other video. What are you doing here? But needless to say, I don't really think the combat of Condemned needed to be improved or really lacked depth. It was fun, frantic, and also satisfying. Condemned 2 on the other hand, whoa, calm down. Condemned 2 on the other hand is also fun, frantic, and extremely satisfying, just in a different way. The way it works in this game is that Ethan has realized that being an FBI investigator simply wasn't for him. Instead, he's much better in the the career path of being a chef who serves up nothing but knuckle sandwiches. Yep, in this game, a new level to combat has been introduced in the form of Ethan's fists, and it really does deepen the combat systems. This is because back in the original, Ethan pretty much had two modes. His weakest state was when he had nothing but a makeshift melee weapon, and his strongest state was when he had a firearm, which made him nearly untouchable. And the funny thing was that you could even become pretty untouchable in melee combat too if you got good enough at the timings. In the sequel though, Ethan now has three states. The first is when he has nothing but fists, the second is when he has a melee weapon, and the third is when he has a gun. But what adds depth to this system is how much more involved in the fight you have to be. Unlike the first game, you can now hold a block for as long as you want, but there are consequences for being a coward. In the fist state, Ethan will take damage if he blocks an enemy attack while holding it, and when you have a melee weapon, holding a block will damage the weapon, putting it one step closer to breaking. And you can't have that happening because in this game, melee weapons will break just from using the things normally. The way you get around this though is by timing your blocks, and this is what I mean when I talk about being more involved in the fight. If you time your blocks to perfectly line up with an attack, then you'll not only take no damage, but you'll also stagger the enemy, allowing you to follow up on the offense. And the offense really is where the magic happens. If you get some good slugs in, you can build up your combo, allowing you to eventually unleash a devastating attack, which in some cases puts the enemy into a stunned state, kind of similar to the defeated state enemies would go into in the original game. But unlike in the original where Ethan would run up to the enemy and go,
"How would you prefer to die?"
in this game you put the enemy in a chokehold, which allows you to move them around and select an environmental takedown. This could mean putting an enemy's head through a TV, or introducing an enemy's head to a wall, or my personal favorite where you literally take out the trash and throw an enemy into a dumpster. Also, my favorite part about this animation is how unbelievably slapstick it is and how out of place it is in this game. I mean, it's not even Ethan throwing them into the dumpster that knocks them out. It's the fucking dumpster lid slamming onto their head when they try to get back out that finally takes them out. Man, how embarrassing would it be to be fighting a guy and he throws you into a dumpster, and when you go to leave the dumpster, the lid slams shut on your head and knocks you out. That is not just an L, that is a detrimental L. You would have to rethink your life after that. Anyways, I'm getting off track. Overall, the combat in the game is good. Ethan now moves at the pace of a normal person. The combat feels like it's got some weight behind it. It's all very responsive, very smooth, and yet I prefer the original. Like, I feel weird saying this after I've just said that the combat is good, but the combat is also doing too much. Like, I get it. The developers of Bloodshot wanted to make the combat systems deeper than they were in the first game, but I feel like they kind of just undid a lot of what made the original formula work. With this game, I feel kind of spoiled for choice on how to go about combat, and yet I don't find many of my options very appealing. Gone are the days when you could just be a master swordsman with a 2x4 plank of wood, because now you don't know if your weapon's gonna break before the fight is through. You don't know if you'll mess up a block and lose your weapon. There just seems to be a lot of hardline rules about combat from the first game that have been taken away, which just kind of leaves you scrambling at some points. And look, this might have been what the devs wanted. They might have wanted to take away a lot of stability that you could feel during combat to make it feel more like a skirmish, but I just feel like it comes off as a little bit fiddly at some points. Like, you can never get a full grasp or gain full confidence in your ability to just go and fuck some people up, you know? But anyways, back on the story. After fighting through a couple of apartment buildings, we hear Dorland over the radio ordering our escape chopper to leave without us. So continuing on ourselves, we attempt to make it to the rooftops, but the plank Ethan is using collapses, sending us through the window of a doll factory. Oh, and by the way, here's another awesome cutscene transition for you. So in this tiny room we're exploring, somehow Ethan gets snuck up on by this dude who gets way too close to the camera. Whoa! Now this guy doesn't have a page on the official Condemned wiki, but if he did, he would be called Exposition Man. Why? Because this guy's only purpose in the story is to run up to Ethan, tell him a bunch of stuff that he could not have found out himself, and then leave. But Exposition Man tells us that the darkness caused in Metro City is all because of a group of people known as the Oro. And yes, this group is the cult at the end of the first game. But before Ethan can get any more info out of exposition man, a flaming plank of wood suddenly falls between the two. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. The building's on fire, but you wouldn't know about that in the previous level because I'm pretty sure the developers ran out of like particle effect resources to put into the actual map. Like the engine couldn't handle it. So there's just this tiny little patch of flame in front of the building and nothing else. So it's so out of left field in this cutscene where there's just flaming lock. So with exposition man disappearing into the smoke, we head out to and enter the worst video game level I have ever played. No, I'm serious. This level fucking sucks. Like when I first played this game, I was still giving it the benefit of the doubt at this point. I was still hanging out, waiting to get snagged by that condemned crazy train, just hoping that the next level would give me more of what I liked about the original. But this level fucking broke me, man. And I'm not talking this level broke me like in the usual video essay YouTuber sense where I played a game and got sad. Shut the fuck up. Nah, this level broke me in the way that I was seriously considering jumping into the Ethan Thomas levels of alcoholism to dull the pain. This is without a doubt one of the most poorly designed, unfun, ugly, boring levels I've ever had the displeasure of subjecting myself to during my limited time on this earth. This is the exact level that Condemned 2 simultaneously shows its true colors and takes a fat shit all over the first game. Like, I can't really summarize this level properly because that would require some self-restraint on my part where I'd have to slowly reveal all the reasons this level sucks at the same pace that the game does. But if I'm being honest, I want to spend as little time on this level as possible. So we're going to sum up what exactly makes this thing so bad. Pretty much the whole plot of this area is to escape the doll factory, and throughout the level we're directed by LaRue over the radio. Oh, by the way, LaRue is the third dude in our 3-person search party. I just forgot to mention him.
LaRue here, ready to give this shithole an animal.
But LaRue said he used to play in this factory when he was a kid, so following his directions, we travel through the building as it slowly goes down in flames. During our journey, we're continuously stalked by a woman dressed as a doll, who we eventually get into a 2-stage boss fight with. And after killing her, we exit the factory, meeting up with Rosa. And all of that sounds like a pretty normal video game level, right? What could possibly be making me say this is the worst level I've ever played? Well, let's break it down in steps. First, I think that the game officially goes too far off the deep end of weird stuff happening, with a new enemy being introduced called the blow-up doll. And I'll give you a high five if you can guess what this enemy type is. I'll give you 5 seconds. Okay, time's up. If you're not thinking of a sentient, tiny doll that chases after you and blows up when it gets near you, you're wrong, and you should be proud of that fact, because I think you would have been a much needed voice of reason on the development team during this fucking game's development cycle, man.
What the fuck is this?
I mean, if you go and play Condemned Criminal Origins right now, is there any part of that game that gives you the idea that shit like this exists in this universe? One of my favorite parts of Condemned 1 was how enemies weren't just horrifying monsters, they were just people. And that's what made the setting feel that much scarier, because these enemies were once functioning normal people like you or me. Introducing this vaguely supernatural thing into this otherwise relatively grounded world just feels like a betrayal of the first game's identity. But it isn't even the worst enemy to come out of this level. There's another enemy type that shows up, which is essentially a regular influence just set on fire, and these guys are horrible to fight, because while they do die in just one hit, they can also take you down in one hit as well if you're missing some health, which in this level is pretty often. The worst part about them is that if they can't catch you, they'll lie down and wait for you to come close again before breaking out into a full sprint. They're like a roaming landmine, just waiting to fuck up your day.
I can't take it no more, man.
But what else is bad about this level? Well, let's just rapid fire it off. The thing is just way too long. It's just room after room of fire and bullshit enemies, and for some reason it was felt it was necessary to put a puzzle in almost every room. But the worst part is that for most of this, you're wearing a respirator which darkens the screen, takes away about 25% of your field of view, and here's the cherry on top of the shit sundae. The entire time you're wearing this thing, Ethan is relentlessly breathing in your ear. And guess what? When you do all this for long enough and you feel like the level is gonna come to an end, your suspicions are confirmed with the appearance of the doll woman, who serves as this level's boss fight. And this shouldn't be a problem. All you need to do is beat the boss fight and then boom, level over, right? Well, that would be the case if this also wasn't one of the most tedious, worst designed boss fights I've ever played. You heard that right. The worst boss fight I've ever played is also inside the worst level I've ever played. I can't catch a break with this game. Pretty much, Doll Woman shows up on a catwalk above a doll production area and begins throwing blow-up doll enemies at us. The way we can fight back is by grabbing our own doll and throwing them back. However, there's only a couple of problems. Doll Woman's dolls have a huge explosion radius, so to avoid getting hurt, you need to be on the other side of your tiny arena when it goes off, and this often means missing the opportunity to throw your own doll. But when you do get the chance, there is also another problem. Your dolls have a tiny explosion radius, and Doll Woman moves to a new position every single time she throws an explosive. What this essentially means is that the combat loop heavily favors Doll Woman. You have to micromanage so many elements of this fight to even get a single hit. First, you need to get your hands on a doll. Then you need to wait for Doll Woman to get to her new position, make sure you're not in range of the doll she just threw, and throw your new doll before she throws her new doll so she doesn't move out of the way before it goes off. Most of all, you need accuracy, because after all this setup, if you miss, you need to start again, and your supply of explosive dolls is not super plentiful. The conveyor belts around the arena brings one to you about every 10 seconds, making it super hard to establish a flow because you'll be dancing around Doll Woman's throws while you uncertainly wait for your next shot. Oh, and sometimes Doll Woman's bombs can block you off from grabbing a new doll, forcing you to wait even longer to get a potential shot at hurting her. Like everything I said about Doll Woman getting to a new position, throwing your bomb before she throws hers, not missing, all those little skill checks you need to get dead on just to get one hit are a luxury, because half the battle is getting your hands on a doll to begin with. And look, I don't know if everything I've just said conveys just how bad this fight is, but it damn near made me turn the game off. It is horrible. And just a reminder, I played this game months ago, and the hate of this boss fight is still fresh in my soul. I mean, just look at how I felt when I first played this thing on stream. This is a showcase of a man slowly realizing that he's not playing a competently designed boss fight. Is that it? I fucking love Condemned 2. Condemned 2 is one of the games ever made. It's definitely up there of one of the games of all time. You know, definitely something that was made. You know, Monolith just has a talent for making games. They do really churn out a game from time to time. Every couple of years, they do release a game. That would have gone, but I hit a fucking box on the way there. Actually go fuck yourself. Actually go fuck yourself. What a fucking horrible boss fight. That has got to be the most unfun thing I have played ever. Now after this boss fight, we make it to a freight elevator and get to do another awesome puzzle where we need to rewire the thing. And yes, this puzzle is nearly as bad as the boss fight itself, but honestly, we're kind of running overtime on how long I wanted to talk about this level by about the entire time I've been talking about this level, so I'll just say it's really bad. What do you mean, red wire? None of these are any color. And after this stellar puzzle, the now rewired elevator blows a fuse, forcing us to go get a new one, and after retrieving one we find lying around, Doll Woman shows up again for another epic boss fight. And to thank her for all her hospitality, we shove her head in an industrial presser and pull a mind-blowing finisher on her.
Good riddance.
Oh, and by the way, this is how Doll Woman's dead body slumps over when all is said and done. Yeah. I don't even know what to say, man. This is the kind of game that is the reason I wasn't allowed to have a PS3 as a kid. You know, all parents back then thought that every single video game was like this one. You know, this grimy, trashy, Rob Zombie wannabe exploitation movie bullshit. I have no idea why they just went ahead and took the vibe from the first game and just threw it out in favor of this. It's not better. Anyway, after this, we head back to the elevator, replace the fuse, and begin going up, which somehow takes us back to street level. I don't know. But Rosa shows up and gets literally jump scared by Ethan, who spawns in right in front of her. It's hilarious. There's like a noise and everything.
Damn it! You scared the crap out of me, Ethan.
But Rosa tells us she found a connection between Malcolm Van Horn and Ethan, so we decide to head to SCU headquarters with her, and the level finally ends. The next level starts in SCU HQ, and Rosa finally lets us in on the thing that was so impossible. It turns out that Van Horn was killed by a gunshot to the head and only mutilated afterwards. The connection that Rosa found between Ethan and Van Horn is that Van Horn is missing his vocal cords, and Ethan's chest x-ray from the first game was blacked out. Through this logic, both Ethan and Van Horn must have something strange about their vocal cords. So taking a shortcut to getting this mystery solved, Rosa decides to take an x-ray of Ethan's chest, and getting inside the machine, Ethan spends about 2 whole seconds in darkness before he starts tweaking.
Rosa, I'm ready to get the fuck out of this thing. Rosa, you still there?
And getting out, the whole building has suddenly gone quiet. And look, this next part is really cool. Unfortunately, none of it's real. And once you realize that, it kind of cheapens literally everything that happens in like the next 5 minutes. But for an abridged version of events, we make our way through the SCU offices until we run into the building's security coordinator, who tells us that the building is being evacuated. So partnering up with him, we start making our way out, experiencing increasingly paranormal events on the way. And this is what I like so much about this section. The entire level turns into the best fear game you've ever played. Through the area, we're given nothing but guns, we fight some Black Ops looking dudes, we fight some oil monsters, and the entire time you have an ally with you that does absolutely nothing to reassure you that you're safe. It's pretty apparent that somebody was obviously flexing a fear-shaped muscle on the team here, and it works really well, with the only unfortunate side effect being that it makes me wish I was playing Fear instead. But continuing on, we make it to the exit only to find it blocked by the same black goo from the opening level, and with the lights going off, our buddy is eaten, leaving us alone. And from this exact moment, the level turns from good to shit because, let's see, how can I explain this? If you don't want to buy Condemned 2 and get to this point to experience what I'm really talking about, boot up the original Fear, rub shampoo in your eyes, get a slightly damaged VGA cable, plug it into the oldest monitor you can find, and get really close to the screen. Only then will you get a taste of what it's like to play this shit. Oh, and epilepsy warning, by the way, skip forward about 20 seconds if you're sensitive to this stuff, because I would say it's flashing lights, but it's so much more. This thing might kill you, man. After defeating the sludge monsters, Ethan wakes up back in the real world, and Rosa says she'll process our x-rays, and as well as that, Director Farrell wants to talk to us in his office. So heading up, we meet with the director, and holy crap, this guy must have become a chimney between the first and second game, because it literally sounds like he smokes 10 packs an hour. I love it.
Come in. Sit down, Mr. Thomas. Can I get you anything?
Yeah. 5 aspirins and a shot of soda water.
I don't think we...
Forget it.
Can you actually imagine working at the SCU building and then Farrell comes over while you're at the water cooler and just hits you with the, "What do you got planned for the weekend?" Now in this sequence, Farrell asks Ethan questions about the mission he went on with the SCU, and depending on how truthfully you answer those questions will dictate how smoothly the conversation goes. Unfortunately, in my case, the dialogue options didn't appear, making this scene kind of like unintentionally hilarious.
What happened immediately after leaving the hotel?
We were waiting for the cops to arrive.
Was LaRue with the group at the time?
I don't remember.
What happened next?
Gusty wind conditions forced the helicopter into a power transformer.
Where were you when the helicopter arrived?
I was in an apartment complex next door.
Explain what happened once Van Horn was secured.
The helicopter started taking fire.
Who ordered the pilot to leave the team behind?
I did.
But eventually things boil over and Ethan accuses Farrell of trying to get him killed, leading to a struggle. But for me, I got another glitch where the music and sound effects didn't play during this part, which just kind of left the scene with this air of insane sexual tension.
Christ, just shoot me and get it over with! Why did you bring me back? That's all I wanted. Cooperation? Then what, kill me?
Anyway, what we get from Farrell is that he isn't the guy pulling the strings here. Someone did try to have Ethan left behind and killed, but Farrell was specifically ordered to protect Ethan, although we don't know who's giving these orders. Also, yes, this does answer the question why Farrell was acting so weird in the first game though, because he wasn't actually trying to arrest Ethan for murder, he was trying to keep Ethan safe. But our little interrogation is interrupted when Agent Dorland calls into the office and tells us that the mayor has been murdered. So heading to the crime scene, it's a gnarly sight. The mayor is dead as doornails and has been dissected at the city's new museum. But with Farrell going to talk to Dorland, a forensics agent shows us something he found on the body. Serial Killer X is alive, and he's got something big planned. After this, Farrell and Dorland head back to the agency, leaving Ethan to investigate the murder. And after doing some snooping, we decide to go looking for the rest of the mayor's body within the museum. And the museum level is actually pretty great. The on and off ambience of the game has turned on for this level, and the metro corruption returns. I think what really helps bring this level back to its roots is how it feels nonsensical in the way that the original game did, not in the way that this game does. Like, this museum is brand new, and yet heading inside, it is completely overrun by the influenced. You get that surreal feeling. This building is a place that showcases how far we've come as a species, and yet the only people who look upon these displays are those who have devolved back into their most animal instincts. But after running around for a bit, we eventually find a strange collection of metal pieces, and calling up Rosa, she determines that these must have been removed from the mayor's body by Serial Killer X. And a new mystery kind of starts to blossom here. Having these metal pieces inside you would be extremely painful, and we begin to wonder why the mayor would have these. Perhaps it's because she's a part of a cult that's full of people that just loves putting metal pieces into their bodies. I don't know, just a theory. But honestly, the question is why, and with those answers not being something we can find here, we head to the exit, fight a boss fight dressed in knight's armor, and meet up with the police again. Here, Rosa tells us that she was examining Van Horn's shoes and found some fecal matter on them. Fecal matter that correlates to a rare deer type only found in a wildlife preservation called Black Lake. So boarding a plane, Dorland lets someone know where we're going and the level ends. Now I know I just skipped over that level like pretty quickly, and I know it's a lot of people's favorite levels, and it is a good level. You get to fight with medieval weapons, you get to fight a cool boss fight, but that's the thing, it's just a lot of fighting. This level just feels like a good level from Condemned 1, and I was expecting this level of quality from the entire sequel, not just one level. And after some of the shit this game has pulled so far, I just don't have a lot of mental A for effort stickers to give out. I don't feel like I want to dive into these levels and find some cool details to tell you guys about, because it's just, oh, it hasn't earned it. But back on track, Ethan makes his way to the Black Lake area when Alco once again reappears to give Ethan some pretty good advice.
Your old boss, Farrell, is trying to protect you. Have you taken a moment to contemplate the meaning of this? He's the one that hired you. He guided you through the ranks at SCU and has kept a close watch on your career. Perhaps he's done this under false pretenses. He may have ulterior motives, using you. Something to think about when choosing your friends.
Suddenly, Ethan returns to reality and finds that the pilot is dead. I think it's implied that Ethan killed him, but either way, the plane goes down and the level begins in possibly the most uncondemned place I have ever seen. Like, I'm all for level variety, but snowy wilderness doesn't really scream FBI horror game to me. But it is a nice looking level, and as we make our way through the snow, we get a call from Farrell who gives us some inside information. He tells us that the people he works for are not united in their goals. Some people see Ethan as a threat, while people like Farrell see him as an asset. Signing off, Farrell calls Ethan Remendium, and we continue through the snow until we reach a cabin where we find several dead soldiers that look like they've been ripped to shreds. And heading further inside, we find the culprit. Yep, there is a huge crazed bear on the loose, and this sequence is what Condemned 2 is known for. Through the cabin, the bear shows up multiple times, chasing you down, and it is legitimately well designed. Each chase is made for you to just barely escape.
I shot my pants.
Making it to a dead end, we find a soldier, just barely alive. He tells Ethan to take his shotgun, and with our last shell, we set off a huge propane explosion. Thankfully, the canisters were filled with helpful juice though, and the bear drags us to Van Horn's massive estate before running off again. And over the radio, we can hear Dorland ordering his men not only to kill us, but to destroy Van Horn's library. So heading inside, we find the door to the library rigged up to several explosives around the building, and our objective is set to find and dispose of each one. And oh boy, this is not a great level. Often when people talk about Condemned 2, they often talk about the bear level. But the funny thing is that in this level, the bear shows up for maybe 5 minutes, and for the rest of it, you just run around Van Horn's house throwing bombs out windows. And this is a really good example of Condemned 2 not having a clear idea of what it wants to be. Because for this entire level, they just completely throw out combat in favor of gunplay, which, considering we're talking about Condemned here, was indeed a interesting decision. See, back when I talked about Condemned 1, I spoke at length about how the game was not a first-person shooter. It was a brawler with guns. There were no crosshairs, reloads, or anything that could help you play the game like it was an FPS, and that was part of the charm. Sometimes you had a gun, sometimes an enemy had a gun, sometimes you both had a gun, but there were never sections of just shooting, unlike here. Now in Condemned 2, some stuff has been added to make shooting easier, like reloading with bullets from another weapon and aiming down sights, but the AI just does not know how to use guns, and often they'll spend a good second looking at you before shooting. They also move around the room and change tactics at an absolute snail's pace, making every single fight just feel really cheap or maybe even a little unfinished. I mean, these are the guys that made Fear. If you're gonna make an FPS level, give those enemies, Fear Soldier AI tactics. It would be a serious challenge. I think it would be a great change of pace. If you want to do an FPS level, do an FPS level. Like, it's clear they wanted more emphasis on guns in this game since they added all these little features, but in the process they make guns overall less fun to play with. Although one addition I do love in the game is Ethan's alcoholism.
My head is screaming for a drink.
Pretty much if Ethan isn't drunk, he's in withdrawals, which you can see while aiming your weapon while sober. His hands are literally shaking. So the way you can improve your aim is by finding some alcohol and drinking it, which is one of the funniest game mechanics I think I've ever heard of. Also, when the system is introduced, in the tutorial it says you just need to drink a small quantity of alcohol to get your aim. But dude, this is a 2 shots of vodka situation because Ethan does not drink anything resembling a small quantity here.
My head is screaming for a drink.
But anyways, yeah, this level is filler. It's not really that fun, and the first time I played it, the game auto-saved when I had 10 seconds left to defuse the door bomb, forcing me to play the entire thing again. Yep, we have apparently broken the game by playing it. But we do eventually make it into the library, and inside we can find a computer that has a video on it that Van Horn has made for us. In it, he uncharacteristically actually explains quite a lot and gives us more background on Ethan as a character than we've ever gotten in our entire game and a half. The general gist is that Ethan is an orphan. His parents were once a part of the Oro, and when they defected, they came into contact with Malcolm Van Horn, a man who also had a bone to pick with them after they murdered his family. However, Van Horn couldn't do much for them, so both of Ethan's parents ended up being killed, while Ethan himself was sent through various foster homes to keep him hidden. The bottom line is that Ethan is special in a way that has the Oro feeling threatened, which is why all this weird stuff has happened to him so far. Apart from that, we learned that after the ending of Condemned 1, no matter what choice the player made, Leland Van Horn survived his gunshot injury and was taken to this estate to heal. During this time, however, Leland became obsessed with the Oro, as well as becoming one of them, putting him at odds odds with his uncle. This is presumably why Van Horn was murdered. And yes, that was SKX that did that, by the way, if you hadn't figured that out yet. But with all this new information, we don't have much time to process it as we're ambushed by more SCU agents. And before we get overwhelmed, LaRue shows up and saves us. Rosa also calls us up and has suddenly realized that things are a little bit strange.
I mean, the city is crumbling all around us. Riots, fires, murders, and now this? What's going on? I'm sorry. I'm just worried something bad is about to happen.
How did you not realize this before, Rosa? You went through all of Condemned 1 and half of this game, which is double as crazy as the first, and you didn't realize anything weird was happening? Like, nothing at all? Really? But other than that, Rosa tells us that the police have caught SKX and that he might be our best shot at getting to the Oro. So heading back to Metro City at light speed, apparently, we find the bus that they're holding SKX in. And after beating up some agents, we head inside the bus to talk to SKX. And I say talk because I can't really understand what he's saying.
Why did you kill your uncle?
He refused to cooperate. He had it coming.
SKX ends up getting the drop on us, knocking us out, and drives the bus into a bowling alley. Waking up, we go after him, and there's not really a whole lot to this level. We beat up some dudes, we do a puzzle where the name Magic Man is mentioned, who Ethan seems to be familiar with, and we find the bowling alley is connected to the school from the first game, which SKX has retooled into being his new base of operations. Inside, it's apparent that Leland has switched gears. Instead of hunting other killers, he's now experimenting on the homeless, most likely trying to discover how the Oro are influencing them. Another person we find here is a kidnapped Director Farrell, and freeing him, we go ahead to clear the area, a mission that eventually gets us thrown into Leland's custom-built bum fight arena. And after throwing down for a bit, Dolan shows up holding Farrell at gunpoint and throwing him into the pit. Farrell tells Ethan he needs to find the voice, which Ethan does, screaming so loud that Farrell's head explodes. If you're waiting for me to say psych, you are going to be waiting for a while. This actually happens. SCU agents then show up to kill Ethan, and we're saved by SKX, who helps us escape because he's doing the cliche villain thing where he wants to be the one to kill us.
What's this about? I thought you were on their side.
Shut up! Think of this as a future investment. Yes. I look forward to cutting you open. Learn your little secret. But now's not the time.
So with our new lease on life, we decide to chase up our new lead, the name that we saw in the bowling alley, the Magic Man. So heading there, Ethan decides to have a nice little drink while he's waiting for Rosa to arrive, and Alco shows up to be, for the first time in the game, an actual representation of alcoholism.
Drink. It's what you do. It's who you are. Shut up. Go ahead.
Ethan is about as tired of Alco's shit as I am of this game's, however, and decides to put an end to things right here and right now. And how does he do this, you might ask? How does Ethan rid himself of his alcohol dependency? Well, he has a physical fist fight with his addiction. And the worst part is, it's really easy.
Ethan, wake up.
That's that, by the way. After that scene, Ethan is no longer an alcoholic, and that's accentuated by the fact that in the game, you don't have to drink alcohol anymore to have a steady aim. So he's legitimately cured himself, and it's a really cool bit of story / gameplay cohesion. It just sucks that it wasn't set up better. Ethan's drinking is never an actual real problem. Like, sure, it's a problem for the character, but it never actually sets him back in his investigation through the story. It really seems like Ethan is just as capable when he's drunk as when he's sober, so there's no stakes. You're not rooting for him to, go dry or anything like that. Ugh, and it doesn't get any better after this because we meet Magic Man, another character who just shows up out of the blue and is presented as always being a part of this world.
Rosa, listen to me. The Magic Man. I know that name. A real tricky son of a bitch. Hangs out at Svensson's Magic Theater. Have you heard of it?
And this part just kind of throws it all over the edge for me. I mean, you're fighting Magic Man's assistants, but where is he getting these people from? Because these are the influenced, and he just has multiple stage assistants just ready to beat up whoever he wants. Part of what made the original Influenced so scary and so intriguing is that they had no allegiance. Having Magic Man have these legions of assistants coming out to beat you up also, once again, spits in the face of the original game. Showtime! This goofy shit does not gel. It does not vibe with the original. This game is actually killing me slowly. Anyway, this is apparently just the theater of easy boss fights because we don't have to deal with Magic Man's tomfoolery for long. Since this fight in total lasts for about 2 minutes before we beat him by dropping him onto a bed of nails. Ethan then interrogates Magic Man about the Oro and he tells us that their main hideout is in a place called the Peninsula. So Ethan and Rosa board a junk barge that will take them to the Peninsula. Ethan gets attacked by some birds, which makes him let out another sonic scream, which terrifies Rosa so much that she runs off into the barge, and the whole level is just straight filler. Seriously, the whole level is just go find Rosa, tell her I'm not a monster, and then what, go to the Peninsula? This whole level is a waste of time, and the worst part is it's not a fun waste of time. The barge is just grey, endless rooms filled with enemies, and near the end we're even introduced to these things. Like, this giant Hulk thingy is the exact reason why I haven't really been talking about my theories on how these enemies came to be about or anything, because they're just generic. They're just monsters. I don't look at a 9-foot tall metal juggernaut and get filled with a sense of wonder and intrigue like I did when I saw, say, the mannequins in the first game. The devs have just gone overboard with escalating the stakes without realizing that the supposedly lower end stakes of the first game were what made it special. But that's a conversation for later, because the level ends with Ethan falling off a railing and getting a piece of metal stuck in his leg. Rosa says she'll go and get help, but Ethan has other plans, crawling into a shipping container that's bound for the Peninsula. But before we get there, we enter another cutscene worthy of an Oscar.
It's been a long road, hasn't it? I thought I killed you. I represent all your demons, Ethan. Alcohol was just one of them.
What now?
Acceptance.
Of what? That I'm a freak? That I'm slowly losing it?
To some degree, yes.
You know, it's kind of funny that Ethan is meant to be portrayed as this deeply troubled man that's literally haunted by his demons, but Alco is legitimately a good companion. He's smart, he tells Ethan what he should be doing, where he should be going, how to solve his problems in general. Like, was the whole purpose of Alco just lost during the writing phase? Because I feel like it would feel a little more natural if Alco was telling Ethan how to do things, but in a more devil on the shoulder type fashion, like he's always appealing to his most destructive habits. But instead, Alco just shows up to confront Ethan on his faulty worldviews and his defeatist attitude towards things. He forces Ethan to accept things that puts him on the road that leads back to the light. Like, the only thing that Alco does that's remotely destructive is just egging him on to get absolutely sloshed.
Drink. It's what you do.
But otherwise, this guy is a pretty solid wingman, which I'm pretty sure wasn't the intention of the writer. But anyways, Alco has stopped by to bestow one last bit of wisdom and tells Ethan that he is the remedy, the only person capable of taking down the Oro. And as Ethan accepts this, Alco disappears and the shipping container he's in reaches the Peninsula. After all this time, Ethan finally has a direction, a purpose. So heading out into the Peninsula, we fight our way inside a massive tower. In this level, the architecture takes a strange turn, becoming more mechanical and technological. And I really just don't have a lot to say about this level. And that's mostly because I can't just pretend like this journey we've embarked on to get here has been some grand adventure. And I sure can't pretend that this level holds any sort of emotional weight that's been building from the very first game, because Condemned 2 barely feels connected to itself between levels sometimes, and by extension, none of that original Condemned DNA is anywhere to be found here. This is meant to be some big showdown, you know, a rematch after that barn fight in the first game, but it just feels empty because it doesn't feel like a rematch. It doesn't even feel like it's a part of the same world. But we do get up to some stuff in the tower. Mostly our objectives are to shut this place down by destroying these big consoles, and while we're doing that, Ethan also finally learns to use his his Sonic Scream ability on command, and it's pretty cool. It essentially just dissolves enemies that you hit it with, and I'll just say it's a shame that they waited until the last level to actually let us use this thing, because by this part, I was a little beyond the point of caring. Anyway, we eventually make it to the top of the tower where we find that Agent Dorland, some random SCU agent, is actually a pretty high-ranking member of the Oro.
The city is under constant surveillance. And soon, our systems will be in full operation, further propagating our sonic ability. There's no escaping us, Mr. Thomas.
He starts monologuing.
After beating his lackeys, we go and set the tower to self-destruct, and our final showdown with Dorland begins. And look, I'm not going to tell you the strategy on how to beat Dorland, because I'm not encouraging you to play this game, man. Just use those couple of hours you could spend playing this game on something more productive. But the footnotes are that we beat the shit out of Dorland and ask him what the Oro are doing all this for.
What are the Oro's motives?
To create hostility. The unwavering desire to fight. To unknowingly become protectors.
Protectors from what? You don't know, do you? Christ, you're the fool. A puppet like everyone else.
Dorland ends up not having the answers we're looking for, so we leave him to die as Rosa arrives in a helicopter.
Get the fuck off me!
Enjoy the scenic route, asshole!
Getting in the helicopter, Rosa tells Ethan that Oro members are being weeded out all over the country, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Soon as they fix that leg up, let's say you and I go get a drink.
I don't think so, LaRue.
Right on.
What I need is some sleep.
The game then ends, but the story isn't over for at least the next 40 seconds, because after this point we get two post-game scenes. In one, the president gives a press conference in an attempt to calm people concerned with the Oro conspiracy, but it's revealed that he is also working for them. He's then handed a piece of paper that lets him know that Ethan is out there and hunting for them, and the cutscene ends. In the next cutscene, we find that SKX has finally annoyed the Oro enough to let him join, and he has several pieces of Oro metal implanted within him, setting up the serial killer for a big confrontation in a sequel that never happened. And that was unfortunately Condemned 2 and the last time we saw the Condemned series. But before we go into my thoughts on the game itself and how I think of it in retrospective, I do want to kind of reward the viewers from the first video with answers, because even after all of that, there is still a burning question left that has not been kind of ruined or spoiled or anything, and that is, who are the Oro? Well, the Oro are essentially the Illuminati, just a little bit more archaic. The name of the cult is Oro Invictus, which is Latin for invincible voice, and these guys are essentially obsessed with the science of sound. See, in the world of Condemned, some individuals have unique vocal cords which allow them to project their voice powerfully. This is seen with characters like Ethan, Director Farrell, Van Horn, and even the Dark Oro Primary in the first game. So this cult was formed around individuals who could pretty much shout super loud, and the reason that many of the Oro are decked out in these crazy metal body modifications is that these actually allow the individual to use their voice in the same way, even if they don't possess the unique vocal cords. So that's who the Oro are, but what exactly are they doing? Well, I'll tell you that it's not your average Illuminati take over the world plot. They act as kind of the bad guys of the series, and also not. Now, because the third game was never made, we don't actually have any solid answers for what the Oro's plan was, but from the research I've done, I think I have a pretty good idea of what their goal is. To start, one of their first objectives is to force human evolution. The metal pieces the Oro have embedded in their bodies aren't just to give their members cool screamy powers, they do it in the hope that through enough generations they can start breeding people who are born with certain genetic traits. Traits like hyperdense muscle and bone mass, vocal cords capable of projecting devastating sonic attacks, and psychic abilities that would allow the individual to strategize better. And if any of these sound familiar, it's because All of these are Ethan. In the first game, we find out that Ethan is super tough, has strange vocal cords, and can see events that have already happened or are going to happen. Ethan is essentially a successful experiment that the Oro have been attempting for a long time. If you remember, Ethan's parents were a part of the Oro, so it's likely they had the metal implants inside them, and Ethan was born with the evolutionary changes the Oro has been looking for. However, when Ethan's parents discovered what their son was destined to do, they defected, which ended with them being killed and Ethan being whisked away into the foster home system by Van Horn. It's only when Ethan takes a medical exam later in life that he's redetected by the Oro, and they begin the next phase of their plan. And you might want to sit down for this. That plan is to groom the entire human race into becoming one unified, bloodthirsty army that will repel a long-coming alien invasion. See, in the original plans for the Condemned series, Monolith wanted to try telling a story with multiple different mediums. This decision finally culminated in the plan that they would create an extended universe containing 4 games and at least 1 movie. The movie was to be named Species X, and it would follow a police officer who was chasing a serial killer. And through his journey, he would slowly realize that he wasn't entirely human, with half of his DNA being alien. From here, the cop would be dragged into an intergalactic war between 2 alien races, and that's about it. The movie never actually got released, and the last update came about 2 years before this game came out. But the plan was for the movie and the games to all come together in Condemned 4, which was where I get my theory about an alien invasion from. But now that we've got all the pieces of the puzzle, we just have to put them together in a way that will reveal the original mystery of the series. So getting down to it, the important stuff in the Condemned world starts about 3,000 years before the games. An alien race either came to Earth, or in a scenario I think is more likely, I think an alien ship crashed that had a few of these aliens inside. And the beings inside the ship were humanoid and had incredible abilities. Their strength was unmatched. They could wield sound as a weapon and communicate without saying a word. See, these aliens were in the midst of a galactic war, and the stragglers left on Earth became fond of humans. Deciding that they could become a good ally, they provided them with new technologies, as well as possibly breeding with them, creating future generations that looked human but had these alien abilities. The humans worshipped these beings and formed a cult around them, naming it after the most incredible ability these beings had imbued them with, their Oro Invictus, their invincible voice. But the peace could not last forever, and eventually the other side of the alien race found Earth, and through a massive battle, the alien invaders were repelled, but at a heavy cost. The stranded aliens, these humans' idols, were killed, and many of the hybrid humans died too, making the invincible voice a rare ability. With the technology the humans had been given, they knew it was just a matter of time before they were attacked again, and began creating a plan. If they were going to survive another invasion attempt, they needed warriors like the ones they had before, but they needed millions of them. Fast forward thousands of years, and the Oro has been attempting to breed new warriors with no success. This can be seen with enemies we actually run into in the game called watchdogs, which are the result of a failed breeding line. These creatures are born without limbs or eyes or even intelligent thought, but they do possess the voice. But overall, they are considered failures to the Oro and are thus used as a living alarm system. The reason Ethan is so important in the world of Condemned, and the reason he's called the Remedy, is because he's the first case of a successfully bred hybrid warrior in over 2,000 years. The secret to essentially fixing their breeding program lies entirely in Ethan's DNA. This is most likely why Malcolm Van Horn is staunchly against the Oro. He has these unique vocal cords, which means he's most likely come from a family line that survived the ancient invasion, but did not align themselves with the Oro after the aliens were killed. This also probably means that the Van Horn family has been constantly hunted throughout the centuries, creating almost a lineage of rebels that ended with Malcolm, but was passed on to Ethan. But then there's another question. If Ethan is the key, then why are the Oro trying to kill him? Well, in the game we can see that the Oro seem to be divided. One half believes Ethan is a threat, while the other half believe he is the way forwards. On the threat side, there are probably Oro members who are scared that their power base will disappear if a hybrid begins trying to take power. This is probably a side of the organization that has long given up on the mission of preparing to repel another invasion and are instead happy to enjoy their power and peace. While on the other side of the schism, the Oro have never given up on trying to bring back their idol's powers, and Ethan represents the hope that humanity will have a chance against the aliens when they return. I also think that each side of this schism has their own contingency plan for the aliens. The side that likes Ethan wants to create an army of warriors that will repel the invasion, while the side that wants to kill Ethan is using sonic emitters all across the world to slowly drive everybody into a constant state of bloodlust. I guess their logic is what's one good super soldier against 100 feral beasts, right? This is kind of supported near the end of the game when Ethan interrogates Dorland, and Dorland says that they are shaping people into unwitting defenders. And the only reason he doesn't mention anything about the breeding program is because he's on the side of turn everybody crazy, while someone like Farrell is on the side of breed more warriors. So yeah, that's kind of my theory on what's going on here. I've put a lot of thought into this and I'm pretty happy with how the theory turns out in the end. I think it fits really well, and I think that might have been pretty close to what they were going for. Of course, we'll never know what the original plan is because we never got that third game and we're probably never going to, but this is as close to the actual lore as you're gonna get. Anyway, let's get this wrapped up. We have finally reached the end of Condemned 2. No, I'm not going to talk about the multiplayer. I'm not going to talk about the Fight Club because I just don't care. Condemned 2 is not a great sequel. It's an okay game. It's a horrible Condemned sequel though, and that is probably the most disappointing part about any of this for me. Really, I think where they go wrong here is how they go about expanding that mystery they've been trying to build for the last 2 games. In the first game, we were chasing serial killers through the underbelly of this dying city. It was a masterclass of world building, combat, and even for all its problems, the story was also really good. The problem is that I don't think the writers took into account the tone of their mystery before wrapping it in the tone of the original game. I mean, there's no part of me in a million years that would have thought that the end-all be-all of this crazy city-based conspiracy was aliens. Personally, I'm not even a big fan of the idea that a cult is behind what's happening in Metro during the first game. I think the whole thing would have worked better if it was a case study of human nature, or how poverty, hunger, and desperation can bring down everything. In fact, if I were to rewrite Criminal Origins, I would probably make the urban decay more symbolic. I'd make the overall meaning behind the game be something like recognizing the importance of empathy, making the serial killers an example of the worst case of what we turn into if we don't care for each other. I think it would make the surreal cityscape that is Metro City that much more interesting if it was just a hotbed of people who are slowly losing touch with each other and reality. I also think the setting like that is ripe for character exploration and emotional storytelling, especially the disillusioned, burned out Ethan Thomas of the first game. But honestly, we are talking about an early 2000s AAA game here. These days we get a ton of emotionally charged and story focused games, but back then it wasn't the norm, so I am just dreaming out loud here. But switching over from what could have been to what is, I don't even think the developers knew what they really wanted Condemned 2 to be. It's either that or the developers didn't know what made the original great and decided to do what other big games were doing at the time. Big action, huge plots, trying to be like the movies. Overall, it's disappointing because it's one thing being a bad sequel just because you don't know what to do with said sequel like Fear 2, but it's an entirely other thing to be a bad sequel because you don't seem interested in continuing the things that made the original great. At times it feels like the game is sticking the middle finger to you and the original game to the point where you gotta be thinking, did this absolutely have to be a Condemned game? Because it doesn't feel like one, and it doesn't feel like it wants to be one, and because of that, I honestly think that the series earned its fate, and it's definitely earned this 4 out of 10 that I'm giving it. But what's next for the Condemned? Why was there never a third game? Well, it's mostly because of this guy named Jace Hall, who currently and exclusively owns the rights to Condemned. To tell a long story short, he's not doing anything with the IP, and it almost seems like he's just waiting for somebody to come along and beg to make something Condemned related. Back in 2015, IGN interviewed Hall and asked him about Condemned 3, and Hall said he'd be open to hearing pitches from indie studios for a new game, and I quote, "The chosen developer will be able to pick what kind of game they want to make. They can choose their vision of the content. They can build up momentum, perhaps a prequel, perhaps a simple mobile phone app for starters. It's all on the table, and I'm open to hearing new ideas." And to me, that doesn't really inspire confidence. To me, that says that Jace Hall is just sitting around waiting for somebody to come to him with a plan on how they're going to use his IP to make him some money, and that just sucks. It really sucks. There's no passion, there's no drive to make something great, and there's no appreciation of the amazing talent that it took to create that original piece of art. And it's just one of the unfortunate reasons that the Condemned IP is going to be left condemned. Once again, I'd like to thank War Thunder for sponsoring this video, so don't forget to check out this awesome free-to-play game by using my link down in the comments or description to get your hands on a massive bonus pack that includes the exclusive Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, 100,000 silver lions, 7 days of premium account, and much more. Once again, this offer is available for a limited time only, so get it while you can.